by sufficient current of electricity. May God have mercy upon you.
Crista Pike was just 18 years old when she committed a crime so disturbing it sent a wave of fear across America. Parents became terrified to send their children to school or college, and a once ordinary teenager suddenly became a name whispered in horror. Now 45, Crista remains one of the youngest women in U.S. history to receive the death penalty. And even after nearly 3 decades, people are still waiting for her execution.
I don't understand why this has all of a sudden come up. She was sentenced to death. Everything was all done. It's been 28 years.
But what could have driven someone so young to such a brutal act? And why has justice taken so long? To truly understand Crista Pike, we have to go back to where it all began. Born on March 10th, 1976, in West Virginia, Crista's childhood was nothing short of tragic. Raised in a home filled with dysfunction, addiction, and neglect, her early years were marred by emotional trauma. Her mother drank heavily throughout the pregnancy, and as a result, Crista was diagnosed with brain damage, specifically in the frontal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for behavior, self-control, and decision-making. This early diagnosis was just the beginning of a life shaped by pain. Her parents showed little to no interest in raising her. They were more focused on partying, drinking, and escaping reality than caring for their daughter. The home was filthy, often unclean, and entirely unfit for a child. Neighbors even recalled seeing young Crista playing near dog waste, left unattended in the yard, an image that captured the level of neglect she endured. The violence inside the home was just as damaging. Her parents argued constantly and often took out their frustrations on Crista. When she was only 2 years old, her parents divorced, and she began to shuffle between them, never truly wanted by either side. Abuse followed her wherever she went, verbal, emotional, and physical. Her father would beat her with a belt for simply disagreeing with him or disobeying a command, and at times, when neither parent wanted to take responsibility, Crista was sent off to live with her grandparents, treated more like an inconvenience than a daughter. Crista's maternal side offered little relief from the chaos. Her grandmother, her mother's mother, was strikingly similar to Crista's mom, an alcoholic with a volatile temper who lashed out verbally and rarely provided the care Crista so desperately needed. But amid the dysfunction, there was one exception: her great-grandmother, Delphi. Delphi was the only person in Crista's early life who showed her real affection and stability. Crista felt loved for the first time, and the bond they formed was strong. Unfortunately, even that safe space had its shadows. A male friend of Delphi's named Ernest reportedly began exploiting Crista when she was just 2 years old. When Delphi discovered what was happening, she immediately threw him out and forbade him from ever returning. Despite this horrific breach of trust, Crista and Delphi's relationship deepened. Delphi welcomed Crista into her home full-time, offering her a rare sense of comfort and protection, something Crista had never known from her parents. But this brief happiness was tragically short-lived. When Crista was just 12 years old, Delphi passed away from cancer, leaving Crista completely alone once again. With Delphi gone, Crista was forced to move back in with her mother, who still showed no interest in raising her. Her mother was preoccupied with her boyfriend, while her father had remarried and started a new family. Crista no longer had anyone she could rely on. At just 13, she began drinking alcohol and smoking, behaviors she had seen modeled by her mother throughout her life. It wasn't long before she was also using drugs. Crista tried to speak out about the abuse and her substance use, but her mother consistently ignored her cries for help. During a family dinner with relatives, Crista confided in some of the guests about the abuse and drug use she had witnessed and experienced. Their statements led to the arrest of several individuals, and Christa was removed from the home and placed in a care facility for 3 months. When she returned, she was no longer the same. Christa had become rebellious and withdrawn. She began skipping school regularly, and tensions with teachers and classmates escalated it into daily arguments. At 15, she started committing petty crimes and stealing, behaviors that soon caught up with her. After one incident, she was arrested and sent to a juvenile detention center for 12 months. Instead of rehabilitation, Christa was met with more violence. She often clashed with other inmates, and her time there hardened her further. By the time she was released at 16, Christa was no longer a lost girl. She was becoming a dangerous one. By the time Christa turned 17, she had become noticeably more aggressive. Her mental health was deteriorating rapidly. She dropped out of school and was already battling depression since the age of 12. Around this time, she was officially diagnosed with bipolar disorder, marking a deepening descent into emotional instability. At 18, in an attempt to turn her life around, Christa enrolled in a government-run program called Job Corps, which aimed to help youth aged 16 to 24 complete their education and develop job skills. Like many others in the program, Christa had dropped out after the 9th grade. She was placed at the Job Corps Center in Knoxville, Tennessee, where students not only studied, but also lived on campus. However, the program's reputation was far from ideal. Violence among students was rampant, and weapons like knives and box cutters were disturbingly common. Many of the participants came from troubled backgrounds, dropouts, at-risk youth, and young adults with criminal histories. Due to lack of proper supervision and growing concerns, the Knoxville Job Corps Center would eventually shut down the very next year, in 1995. It was in this tense and dangerous environment that Christa met Tataril Ship, a 17-year-old with a background almost identical to hers. He, too, had left school after 9th grade and had become involved in criminal activities. His mother, worried he was ruining his life, had urged him to join the Job Corps to get back on track. When Tataril first met Christa, he later claimed it was love at first sight. The two quickly formed a deep connection, bonding over their traumatic pasts and shared struggles. Both came from broken homes, both carried scars from childhood, and both were emotionally vulnerable. But their relationship took a dark turn. Instead of helping each other heal, they spiraled further into darkness, obsessed with Satanism. What began as fascination soon grew into full-blown devotion. They spoke frequently about the devil, and eventually, their discussions took a horrifying turn. They began to fantasize about offering a human sacrifice. Tataril was intimidating, known across campus as someone no one dared to cross. He was always ready for a fight, and Christa, already aggressive, fed off his energy. Their relationship became toxic and abusive, consumed by violent thoughts and destructive obsession. Meanwhile, Christa had a rocky relationship with another student named Colleen. From the very first day, the two didn't get along, and their tension only escalated over time. Things took a serious turn during the Thanksgiving break. Christa had to return home to her mother, a trip she dreaded, while Tataril and Colleen remained on campus. During Christa's absence, Tataril and Colleen began spending more time together, forming a connection that didn't go unnoticed. When Christa returned, everything was about to change forever. When Christa returned to campus after Thanksgiving, she was hit with a devastating revelation. Tataril had hooked up with Colleen. He claimed it meant nothing, blaming Colleen entirely, saying she was obsessed with him and wouldn't leave him alone. Though Tataril was clearly unfaithful, he twisted the narrative to make it seem like Colleen was the aggressor, and Christa, already emotionally unstable, believed every word. To her, Colleen wasn't just a threat. She was a thief, someone trying to steal the only person Christa felt connected to. Furious and humiliated, Christa vowed to take revenge. What followed was a chilling descent into cruelty. Christa began tracking Colleen's every move, along with a few close friends. She started bullying her relentlessly. Colleen was regularly harassed, threatened, and emotionally tormented. She became so frightened that she called her mother in desperation, explaining that she no longer felt safe and wanted to leave. But Colleen didn't share the full extent of her fears. She never named those behind the harassment. Her mother, unaware of how dire the situation truly was, urged her to stay strong and finish her education. Then came the breaking point. On January 11th, 1995, Christa had a conversation with a friend named Kim, where she chillingly admitted that she wanted to kill Colleen. Kim later told authorities that the next evening, January 12th, around 8 p.m., she saw Christa leaving the Job Corps Center with Tataril, Colleen, and another student named Shadola Peterson. About 2 hours later, only 3 of them returned. Colleen was missing. The next morning, on January 13th, a couple out for a peaceful morning walk stumbled upon a trail of blood in a wooded area. Curious and concerned, they followed the stains, unaware of the horror that awaited them deeper in the trees. As the couple followed the trail of blood through the brush, they stumbled upon a chilling sight, a partially clothed body lying lifeless in the woods. Horrified, they immediately called the police. When officers arrived on the scene, they found not only a large pool of blood, but also clear signs of a violent struggle. It was evident that the victim had tried to fight back, to escape, but had ultimately been overpowered and dragged back to her gruesome end. The victim's waist was exposed, her face brutally disfigured. Disturbingly, her body bore sinister markings, a pentagram etched into her skin and a star on her chest, both symbols associated with dark rituals. This wasn't just a murder. It appeared ritualistic, deliberate, and deeply disturbing. Soon after, the police received another call, this one from someone at Job Corps, an education and training facility. The tip pointed to 3 of its students. As investigators dug deeper, a horrific truth began to unfold. One of the suspects, a teen named Christa, wasn't just involved. She seemed to relish in what had happened. After the murder, she returned to the center and bragged about keeping a piece of the victim's skull as a twisted souvenir. Multiple students later confirmed that Christa had excitedly shared graphic details of what she had done, how the victim, Colleen, had pleaded for her life, and how no one showed her mercy. One concerned student eventually told their parents everything. Those parents contacted the police, providing critical information. It turned out Christa had armed herself with a knife and box cutter before luring Colleen away. She wasn't alone. 2 others, Tataril and Shadola, were also present. Shadola later admitted she believed in satanic rituals and had gone along simply to witness what she thought would be a sacrifice. According to her chilling statement, Christa and Tataril tortured Colleen for nearly 45 minutes, cutting her, carving into her body, and eventually striking her repeatedly with a heavy chunk of concrete until her life ended. What shocked authorities even further was that the attackers appeared to celebrate what they had done. For Christa, keeping a piece of Colleen's skull wasn't just a trophy. It was a symbol of triumph, something she openly flaunted. All 3 suspects were arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During interrogation, they confessed. Christa admitted to slashing Colleen multiple times with both a knife and a box cutter. Even as Colleen begged for her life, the group continued their brutal assault, dragging her back each time she tried to escape. An autopsy confirmed the brutal details: multiple slash wounds likely caused by a meat cleaver and a sharp cutting tool, and blunt force trauma from a heavy object, likely the rock. The victim's partially dressed body was discovered on a Friday morning in a remote, wooded area. The fallout was swift. The Job Corps Center's reputation was shattered beyond repair, and it was permanently shut down in 1995. On March the 22nd, 1996, Christa Pike became the youngest woman in the U.S. to be sentenced to death in decades. The method? Execution by electric chair. A judge solemnly declared she would be transferred to Tennessee's death row. Just days later, Christa wrote a letter to her boyfriend, Tataril, professing her love and chillingly adding that she didn't even make Colleen suffer too much. Tataril, meanwhile, received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Shadola, who played a lesser role, was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Even after more than 2 decades, Christa Pike remains on death row. Her legal team has filed multiple appeals over the years, citing her traumatic childhood, alleged brain damage, bipolar disorder, and PTSD. But in 2001, she again made headlines, this time for attempting to kill another inmate. That act ultimately led to the rejection of one of her key appeals. Today, her name lives on not as a cautionary tale of youth gone astray, but as one of the most disturbing cases of teen violence the nation has ever seen. For true crime followers, it's a haunting reminder that sometimes the darkest monsters walk among us, disguised as ordinary people.